Hello, everyone. The Crash Gals are back. That's right. The Crash Gals are back to bring you a 30th century view on all the things you enjoy. We're talking comics, cartoons, movies, the good media you might have missed, and the bad things that you should just go ahead and stay away from. We will not let you touch them. We came back from the future for that very thing, for that very reason. Today and most days, we're going to stop by the DC universe to discuss some pretty major topics. Um, Harley Quinn's Juggernaut celebration in TV, movies, comics, and in general. It's season 2 of our new show, and we just started season 1. So, 30th century views, maybe a little bit behind, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Uh, we're also going to be talking about the fabled Snyder Cut being released in 2021, and the new DCU show Stargirl. So we will start by saying who we are. I'm Vast Empires, and I'm joined here by Monsoons.
Hi, I'm Monsoons.
And let's dive into the first topic, Harley Quinn. So, what do we know about it right now? It's a thing from the
We
DC
know
universe. Um,
it's a hot
and
commodity.
it's a hot commodity. It's the DC Universe's first original animated show.
That sounds right. I would buy it. I would buy it with a lot of money. Yeah, it feels like DC Universe's first animated show, which is on the downside a little pathetic in my mind, just because they have done so many animated movies. You'd think that they would have figured this out already.
Hmm.
Um, and to be fair, in comparison to the DCU animated movies, this is a much different animation style.
Hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily say inventive, but it's not bad. Like, it suits what it needs to do, while kind of giving me personal nostalgic vibes for some of the older DC Warner Brothers, like Cartoon Network cartoons.
Yes, and I was going to go ahead and point that out. When we say that this is the first DC Universe cartoon show, we don't mean that it's the first cartoon in the DC Universe. No, 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 no. We've been around long enough to know that's not true. We just mean that it's being produced and published underneath the DC Universe umbrella, whereas something like Teen Titans was initially run on Cartoon Network. Batman the Animated Series, yes, it was under Warner Brothers Wheelhouse, but it was shown on Fox. Like all of the older Batman and Robin cartoons from the 70s and the Justice League cartoon from the 70s, they all existed. But this is the first one that's underneath the DC Universe umbrella.
Yeah, not to be confused with Young Justice season 3, which is a little bit of an Arrested Development situation, and not
Yeah.
unlike that show. Its most recent season, after being saved, is maybe not our favorite. Uh,
Probably not.
yeah. But it's unsurprising, honestly, though kind of refreshing that Harley Quinn. I mean, I'll be honest. Up top, Harley Quinn is not usually my favorite character. She's a character that was created in the 90s for the Batman animated series TV show, if I remember correctly.
And you are?
Okay, thank you. She's like she's got such a cult following that it's much easier, I feel like, for DC Universe to use her than pick somebody that I think would make a much more compelling protagonist for a cartoon, possibly, because there's not as much catch up and it's a lot easier. She's a little bit of the Deadpool of our universe, but had a lot easier time making it to different movies and television shows than Deadpool did, to be honest. But yeah, so this Harley Quinn show, right up top, one of the things that I found really interesting and surprising, since you and I just started the show, even though it's on its second season, the first episode of the show is pretty much the plot of the Birds of Prey movie, or at least the beginning of it,
Mm.
which I think is interesting. I think, considering we spent so much time with her as a sidekick to the Joker, to see DC make a decision to have all of her properties now be about her being separate from the Joker is actually kind of interesting,
Hmm.
considering how that's usually the opposite of what they're willing to do for their characters.
Yes. Yes, and it's arguable that during that time period, like, not to say that I was there, but I was there in the past. I was a young Empires watching the Batman the Animated Series after school um, in my youths. And it was right around the time when I just started collecting comics, um, because my cousin JJ, rest in peace, was a huge fan of Marvel comics, huge fan of the X-Men, and he collected them, and so I was collecting them too. But as much as I enjoyed those things, I kind of always dovetailed to DC Universe and Batman and Robin. And I feel like one of the while is it Bruce Denny?
Yeah. No, Paul Dini? Oh man, we're messing this one up.
We're messing this one up, and that's all my fault. But the creator, the progenitor, and the executive producer of Batman the Animated Series, while he may have had several other reasons to create the character of Harley Quinn, one of the things that it did in my mind, thinking about this, is it
Paul
softened
Dini.
Paul Denny.
That's how
Paul
important.
Denny. Thank you. One of the things that Harley did was um, make the Joker accessible again, for a broader audience, because pre early '90s Joker was going through some really dark stuff, the Killing Joke, um, and all
Everything Frank Miller.
everything Frank Miller, and so they were trying to lift the character out of the mire a little bit, and giving him a sidekick uh, actually really helped. And so where I'm going with this is saying that it's one of the things that made Joker popular was having Harley with him. And so, like, divorcing those two, they have now the DC universe has a very strong opinion of what Joker is and supposed to be. She scoffed, but that's also one of the maybe one of the positive things about Harley getting to have her own place in the universe, where she has existed in comics for so long, but like in the larger media verse with her own cartoon and her own movie. Um, so yeah, I actually think that's kind of cool that she's able to strike her own way when a lot of the times, like, those early characters don't get a chance to do that.
Yeah, we personally talk and think a lot about Dick Grayson, but like, there's a reason there's never been a Nightwing movie, because they don't really want characters like Robin or characters that were sidekicks or love interests. Like, I remember seeing a very interesting idea for a Lois Lane movie where Superman is the incidental character in it, and making that kind of a comedy, and stretching out in the internet knowing that that belongs to someone else is an idea. I see you. Can't remember who you are though, but I'll remember later. It was an amazing idea, but one that could never happen. DC's not going to do a Lois Lane solo movie. But to get to see Harley Quinn, especially after what a train wreck, in my personal opinion, Suicide Squad was, which we're going to get to you, Snyder. I appreciate that the tone of both of the big projects that have come out for her have been her striking out on her own. That said, if I'm going to have to compare the two, which I'm going to, not because I have to, but because I will, Birds of Prey does a much better job of it thus far, and I think part of the reason that is, or maybe this is just me, I think it's because the writing feels a lot more authentic in Birds of Prey. You can feel that there were a lot of women involved in the production. The jokes feel like women wrote the jokes, whereas with the Harley Quinn show, which, is fun. I think my favorite episode has really been the one with Robin in it, and, I'm biased, so I was going to like that one at one way or another.
Same, same.
But I think the humor tends to err on a very, very typical Cartoon Network late at night, Adult Swim kind of comedy, when it does, sometimes it really just leans hard on the idea that because it's on the DC universe, it can have characters curse a lot, dropping F-bombs being the main punchlines of jokes. There's a whole episode about a character calling Wonder Woman the C word, and it's fine. You know, I've been told it gets better. We'll probably have to do, a whole new episode on it once we get to season 2, when apparently everything gets much more original is the hard way to put it, but with DC Universe, when something kind of takes a universe and throws the entire playbook out the window to create something of its own, it is very original. So, but for now, for the first 4 episodes that we've watched, I've really had a deep sense of, men wrote this, and that's not helped by knowing the spoiler of what happens between Poison Ivy and Kite Man. So
I would even go one step further and just say that, yeah, men wrote this, but not particularly well. And this is coming from someone who also recognizes, like you said, that there is some like late night Adult Swim humor, or maybe even like an American Dad esque type vibe to the
yeah,
show. And I feel an echo of Venture Brothers in the comedic timing of the show.
get
Um,
out. I was gonna say Venture Brothers, but I felt the writing was not up to the par of Venture Brothers to
that's
put them in the
exactly what I
same
was about
league.
to say. That's exactly what I was about to say. But it pales in comparison to Venture Brothers, which even in the later like seasons, which I didn't like, I still enjoyed, but not as much as like the first ones, of course. But the writing was never like the jokes were spot on, the timing was great. Or even Archer. Like, did you ever watch Archer?
It did, yes. The earlier seasons.
Even with Archer, like the first couple of seasons, um, I cannot begin to tell you how amazed I was when I realized, because I know that when you do um, animation, your voice actors go into a recording booth and they do the lines several times, and then someone decides which ones they're going to use. But every time I watched Archer, it felt so tight that I felt like they were doing a table read, you know?
Yeah.
That's how the
I mean,
comedy was, and it's not like that for Harley Quinn.
yeah. Well, and there's a couple exceptions. Like Bob's Burgers, I believe that they still all record at the same time together.
Oh yeah.
And that's why that one is so tight. But yeah, with Harley Quinn, you can feel that it is a studio. You know, like someone has gone into a voice booth, they've done their lines for the day, and it's not that they're not trying. It's and again, as it gets further on, we may change our minds about this. But the first 4 episodes, it was very much all right. I don't know if I need to watch more of this, but all right. Which I feel bad saying a little bit because it is some original DC Universe content, and I am always walking this line. When we do our whole episodes on Titans and where that went, and we finished catching up on Young Justice. I want so badly, and it's not just because I'm an embittered DC fan who grew up with people telling me Marvel movies were better. Like, I want the content to be better because I want the content to be there. Not least of all because I think we're starting to see some inventiveness that I personally think DC is doing that Marvel's not doing, when we watch Birds of Prey together and we talk about it instead of me just alluding to it, Cassandra Cain is in it, which, while I don't think her character is the Cassandra Cain we're used to, I hate to say it, but it was a surprise and a joy to find out that she was going to get to be in a live-action movie. It
Yeah.
was a joy to find out Jason Todd, Rose Wilson, and Jericho were all going to be in Titans in a live-action performance, They're pulling characters that we don't usually get to see. And the only time I've seen that otherwise was when the CW did Black Lightning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very, like even Supergirl, that's not that far out there. Though we'll come back to it, but Stargirl has a similar feeling. Like I'm kind of overjoyed to see back catalog characters who aren't aren't as fan favorited, aren't as no one
Well
has any
known.
as set in cement ideas about the characters, you know? Like not to the extent that other characters do. Like this is not a Batman or a Superman where you have to deal with like a very strong opinion that everybody has about it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's been really interesting and inventive
Oh, Doom.
across their products. Doom
Yep.
Patrol, yeah, doing a whole Doom Patrol. Um, whereas you know Marvel's pulled a couple, but for the most part, it's the characters that everyone knows. Um, yeah.
Although I will say, in Marvel's defense, I will say, and Lord, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but until recently, those characters no one really knew. Um, they did not have the iconic stature like Batman and Superman, who have had media products going on, like television media products and films since the 30s, and cartoons. In the Batman, the Superman cartoon, wasn't that in the 30s,
I want
40s?
to. I want to say 40s because Wonder Comics introduced Detective Comics introduced Robin in the 40s.
Okay. So but
Trying
it's
to
about
remember
that.
what timelines.
It was post World War, pre
Oh yeah.
50s. I do know that much. And then Superman had a television show, and you know, there's a whole story about the television show. And then 60s Batman, which was, I honestly think, was my first introduction to Batman, and cable television, to be perfectly frank. When we came back to the States after my family was traveling abroad with the military. And, that summer on the Family Channel, they would play 60s Batman like all the time. And I fell in love. Fell in love with it. Um, so, yeah, they. As hard as it is to say, it's actually not hard to say as a DC fan, because there are a lot of Marvel properties that I enjoy too. But Marvel did do a lot to build their non-Spider-Man characters up as recognizable in the same, and so that they can compete with name recognition with an Iron Man and a Batman, where like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, never would have happened. Absolutely never would have
You
happened.
you are right. It's hard to remember a pre-Marvel Universe world, and when you get down to it, and this is mind-blowing, a pre-Marvel Universe world was a world in which the only two really famous Marvel properties were Spider-Man, like you said, and the Fantastic Four.
Hmm.
The Fantastic Four were hugely popular. I think didn't they have a cartoon? Um, there was
Actually,
definitely like,
they had an
go
old
ahead.
cart. No, no, I was about to say they did have an old cartoon. Either they had their own old cartoon in like the 60s, or they appeared in the 60s Spider-Man cartoon.
That sounds right. I definitely had a moment there where I thought I was wrong because I suddenly couldn't remember whether or not I was thinking of the Wonder Twins or Fantastic Four, both of which had really old cartoons. So, like, while the Wonder Twins used to be, like, an older property, too. But, yeah, no, I really appreciate Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, Stargirl, Doom Patrol, and Titans. I really, in that they, and even Young Justice, though I have my qualms,
Hmm.
that they are pulling backlog characters. I think you kind of have to, and I think that's one of the ways that Marvel succeeded that DC hasn't, is in the fact that they could build the allure around Captain America and Iron Man because they could decide what people were going to think of them before we got to that point.
Hmm.
Though, you know, it's a. Because we've had a lot of Batman movies, but it also means there are strong, you know, majority opinions on who Batman is. And so I'm really excited when I get to see, as much as I love Batman, you know, like Birds of Prey and Harley Quinn to a lesser extent, um, but Titans in the first season, Doom Patrol, to see these properties be like, cool, these characters exist in the same universe, but we don't need to spend the time telling you how they are related to Batman. We
Yes.
can, and we, you know, in some cases will, but and also some of their print properties they're trying to do similarly, and it's really nice to see. So even though I have qualms with the writing of Harley Quinn, and I hope it gets better, it's nice to see some inventiveness in that.
Yeah.
Though Birds of Prey, hands down, is a much better version if you want to watch Harley Quinn break up with the Joker and then go on a self love journey. So
And I do. And I will go ahead and also say that as critical as we are, and we just addressed that together, but as critical as we are, um, we did overall decide that we were going to continue watching Harley Quinn. And we had some laughs during the show. And I also enjoyed the Nemesis episode where Damian Wayne Robin appears. And if you know me, you will know that that is something that is not typical of me. But it was a fun episode. So yeah, I look forward to continuing this one. It hasn't completely thrown me off like season 3 of Young Justice did. Um, and I think we'll actually make it to the end of season 1. Like knock on wood, but unless something drastic happens, it's just a fun romp that is supposed to get better. So I look forward to that.
yes, and to be fair, some highlights. I absolutely adore their version of Clayface. He is a thespian. He is ridiculous. He is super fun. King Shark is really fun.
Yes.
I also love Poison Ivy and her plant from Little Shop of Horrors that lives in her apartment. Like,
Yes.
there are delightful, like, for as critical as we've been, there are delightful features to this cartoon that, like, I hope continue to stay in it because they are my favorite. And even Harley Quinn, like, she is really badass in it. She, you're not going to get me to say that I like it more than Margot Robbie doing as much of her own stunts as possible, and then also same with everybody else in Birds of Prey. But I do appreciate that there is there's an emphasis that, yeah, she was the actual brawn behind everything, if not sometimes also the brains. And, I love to see the Joker taken down a peg
Yeah.
in his own storylines. And there's nothing like a ex-girlfriend beating their boyfriend at their own game storyline for Harley Quinn to make me love her. Like, I just love her when she does that. So.
Mm-hmm. So I think that sounds like we're coming to the end of our Harley Quinn topic today, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to revisit it because we still have to get Empires to watch Birds of Prey. I missed it in the theaters, and because I missed it in the theaters, I just didn't get a chance to see it yet. And of course, we're going to continue on watching Harley Quinn on the DC Universe. Which brings us to our next topic, which is the Snyder Cut being unleashed.
Don't like and people we don't like doing Harley Quinn. God, I just can't believe the Snyder Cut is happening. Frankly, not least of all because the Snyder Cut doesn't exist. It doesn't. It will, and we know that now because they've decided to pay this man $20 million?
Something along that lines.
Mm-hmm. Something along that lines. $20 million or something.
Between 2 and 20.
Yeah. Pay him and they were going to pay him $20 million, and now he's saying it's going to cost more than $30 million. And this is the Snyder Cut, which is supposed to be coming out on HBO Max in 2021, which, if anything, tells you that this never existed in the first place. Like, he definitely had some raw footage, and he had a lot of the baselines down, but probably didn't have any of the CGI taken care of. There's a really good video about the pre-process before the process that would have to take place for Snyder to have a Snyder Cut by the YouTuber Folding Ideas. That is very good. Not to rep someone else's own work while we're talking about it on the podcast, but he knows a lot more about 3D animation than either of us do, and post-production as a person who works in that field. But, there is just no way that there was a version of this movie that was ready for release, because if it was, they would have used it on the first day HBO Max came out to get butts in seats, and they couldn't. And frankly, it's silly. There's no version of this movie, having seen Suicide Squad, having seen Sucker Punch, having seen Batman vs. Superman, and having avoided Man of Steel. I don't think there's a universe in which the Justice League version, as created by Snyder, is that much better. I'm not saying that having Snyder leave and bringing in Joss Whedon halfway through and then trying to finish it with two directors who have vastly different perspectives was going to work, but I don't think anyone should get their hopes up that the Snyder Cut is going to be that much better than what we got in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And
Look.
also, I just don't want it to work out, because then he'll make more movies for DC, and I'm tired of
Well, there's a lot of things that we could say about Zack Snyder. Clearly, we're not the biggest fan of his directorial vision. There are some things that we think that he does well. I think some of his cinematography is actually really nice. Um, if I'm thinking directly on Justice League, wait, no, did Superman, Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, was that the official title?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about that one specifically, there were some really nice editing work done when you saw. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, if there is some sort of, middle of the path video game that is super. You know what? They should have put him in charge of whatever the Assassin's Creed movie was, because at least it would have been visually interesting.
Yeah.
He would make a very good director for decent video game movies. But, I don't know what level of hand he had in any of the scripts. I don't know if he just picks bad scripts. But, there are definitive issues in Batman vs. Superman. The moments that I remember liking out of that movie were not meant to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
They were a lot of the choices Ben Affleck made, and I liked him as Batman, but he
Me too.
he managed to wear that metal sausage costume and still project fear when he realized that he was going to lose to Superman, and that is just a feat unto itself. But
Mm-hmm. Oh, his action
as
sequence
visual,
was really good there too. I do want to point out Ben Affleck's action sequence when you first see him, or the first two times you see him fight as Batman, was actually really good too. All right, sorry, continue.
oh no, you're right, and I have a harder time pulling things that I like by Snyder. I don't really think he does a very good job, but more than that, I think his movies are in a lot of the same vein as the movies that tend to put people off of DC.
Hmm.
And, I'm more than a little biased. I want to see something original. I want to see something that actually, you know, um, has heart,
Yeah.
and understands what the central character is. And I just think he is just another long line. The Nolan movies tend to get forgotten, and whether you liked them or not, they were wildly popular, but they were
Or
very
saw
dark.
them.
Yeah. But they're very dark, and, to that degree, I don't enjoy this version of the DCU. I think Marvel has already cornered the market on an extended universe, and I think if DC wants to compete, they'd be better off making more movies like Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, because that movie has little nods, there's nods to Suicide Squad, and you know Batman exists in the universe, but otherwise it's just like a movie that takes place in Gotham. Gotham is the central unspoken character, and you can make a lot of movies where Gotham is that central unspoken character that can have nods to each other but don't have to adhere to some sort of fixed universe that makes it too hard to be original and too hard to create your own thing.
I
And I
also
go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. No, complete your thought.
Oh, I think they're oh nope, I've lost it. I think there's a lot to be had in something like that, and even in Shazam is a good example. Having universes that are a little bit separate from themselves but could have nods to each other allows writers and filmmakers to create different genre movies within the DC universe, and I think that is the better way to go with it than try and just make a gritty comic book movie every time.
And so I'm going to both agree and disagree with you here, because agree in saying that there is a lot of room for inventiveness in the DC universe. It's got a character log that is deep, if not deeper, than Marvel. It's got a fan base that is deep, if not deeper, and it's got some really good stories to be pulled out. And I think I've seen it um, quoted several times, but Marvel films are about humans becoming gods, and or excuse me, Marvel comics are about humans becoming gods, and DC Universe's films are about gods becoming human. And there's a humanity in DC Comics that, of course, I'm biased in, but that I do see, and that's what appeals to me, and that's some of the stuff that you don't really see in Snyder's version of the universe. And it's one of the things that made when, and we're going to get back to Justice League, I promise, but when Wonder Woman appeared on the scene, like there was a humanity to her character. It's one of the reasons why people responded so well to it. Um, because you don't always need a film about how grim and dark the world is when the world is so grim and dark around you. Sometimes it's good to see how a singular person is fighting to make the world better. And that's what a lot of DC Comics is about. But we don't get a chance. We haven't gotten a chance to see that in, Snyder's versions of the films. Does that make sense? Snyder's
Yes.
version of the
Oh,
universe. And so
yeah.
that's where I do agree with you. Where I don't agree is that Marvel has cornered the market, because Marvel has proven that there is still room. After how many times did they reboot the Hulk before they got him right? Like the Hulk had like two movies. There are three
Two
movies.
movies. Uh, two specific movies that were supposed to lead into the DC universe. And then technically he shows up at the because Mark Ruffalo hasn't had his own movie as the Hulk, but he is the third Hulk to be in the to be expected for the DC universe or the Marvel universe.
Right. And one of them was Edward Norton, right?
Yes.
I can't remember. I don't know if he was in both films. I know that Ang Lee directed one of the films. But it's been so long ago. I know I didn't even see those films. Um,
I saw the Edward Norton one. The one that came before it, which was the first attempt, was the Eric Bana one.
that's right, Eric Bana. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I didn't see that one.
And the Fantastic Four films, they had two of them. I don't believe I saw the two original ones either, with Chris Evans as Johnny. Um, and oh my gosh, I can't even remember Horatio Hornblower's like actor's name, but they had Horatio Hornblower as Reed Richards, and it was just so
Oh
bizarre
wow.
to me. And Jennifer Alba as Yes, that was such a weird casting film, weirdly cast film, but it worked apparently because it had a sequel. But Jessica Alba. Did I call her Jennifer Alba? I'm so sorry. I meant Jessica Alba. But I'm saying all that. They have proven that there is room to build your universe and become a powerhouse. So I I saw DC's vision. Like, it was really clearly laid out. We're going to get our two biggest heroes. We're going to put them in the film together for the first time ever. Um, then we're going to show all of the characters together, and then we're going to fan out and let them create their own movie. So we're going to reverse it. We don't have to, they said, we don't have to spend the time to give you an origin story for every single hero because everyone knows Batman and Superman.
Yes.
The tertiary characters, their origin story will be Justice League. And then the films that span out from there, the Flash film, the Aquaman film, which I did enjoy, um, the Wonder Woman film, they will be references, but not necessarily origin stories. I mean, well, they kind of facilitated what am I trying to say here? They were a sense in a sense origin stories, but your first impression of them were not those films. They were actually from the Justice League. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and it could have worked, but to me, the lead-in films, despite all the money that they got for putting the butts in the seats with the name recognition, like it didn't. It left fans wanting more, but not more of the film. They wanted more of a better film to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, my take on the Snyder Cut is why are you letting this man bilk you of money? Like, will it really get money into HBO Max's hands? I would say yes and no. Yes, people will tune in. They'll do their free week or their free month just to watch it. Some people will forget to turn off their subscription, and so they'll be billed for like 2 or 3 months, and then they might say, "Oh yeah, I'll keep it," or they'll say, "No, cut it off." But I don't think they're going to get a wave of sustained um, viewers just from that film alone. Now, that's not to say that HBO doesn't have its own amazing catalog of television, movies, documentaries. Like is a it is a powerhouse production studio, you know? It really does some really cool things. I'm watching Perry Mason right now, and while it's not what I was expecting, well, it was not what I was expecting. They're doing a really respectable job of creating this new character, and I'm loving it because you know I love detective stories. Um,
Yes.
so, well, okay, I'm digressing all over the place. But why are you letting Zack Snyder bilk you of money? Two, how, and I put this in our notes, but how many times can a man fail up before you let him fall?
Agreed.
Because, like, when was the last time, like, did he do this 300?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think,
Yes, he did. He did the 300 movie.
so he did the 300 movie, and that got him, like, a lot of mileage. Not gonna knock
Yep.
it. It was fun. You know, whatever. What has he done great since? Film The Watchmen? It wasn't the best adaptation, right? Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Gahul? Uh,
Didn't
I
even know
mean,
that was him.
that was him, and I can't say that it was bad, mainly because I didn't see it. But I might take a look at it because you know I love animated films. Sucker Punch? No,
Not even a little bit.
not even a little bit. So how did he go from Sucker Punch to Man of Steel?
I don't know. I
I don't
really
know.
don't.
He's still riding high on that 300, right? And not to sound critical, because like, not to sound terrible, because of course Zack Snyder is more successful than I may ever be, but why? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Oh my gosh, he's doing the Fountainhead.
Of course he is. See, this is his entire problem. These are the
Oh,
sort of movies he makes. I do. I just.
it
All they
figures
have
he's an
done
Ayn Rand
is.
neophyte.
Yeah, and it just proves that, like, he just proves the whole situation basically allowed a bunch of bummer people, let's be honest, bummer people on the internet to complain until they got what they wanted. And sometimes that's good. Like, I haven't watched Pitch. I keep meaning to, but I'm bad with sports. But, like, that's something that should have gotten renewed. You know
Yep.
what didn't need to get renewed? Scott Snyder's career. Not Scott Snyder, though I don't like him either. Zack Snyder's career with this movie. It wasn't necessary. Um, it's stupid. It just didn't need to happen, frankly, and it's very frustrating that we have to wait and see if DC is going to, like the if only this had been a Disney production, because they don't work with someone after they fire them, with the exceptions of James Gunn. But still, and I just don't want to see another, like, I liked the idea of the universe that they were building in Batman versus Superman. I think there is a really interesting concept in there, especially an older Batman who has been around for a while and is almost an urban legend in his own city.
That was
What
cool.
I don't like is the idea that Superman has to be dark, that everyone's so dark that they kill people, frankly. That's not why I come here.
Hmm.
And any movie that was going to spawn out of that, including the Batgirl movie that they almost made with Joss Whedon of all people, would have just been bad,
Yeah.
frankly. And I think part of what we're seeing with the Marvel burnout is you have to make more than just one type of superhero movie, or you're going to have people who aren't as interested,
Yeah.
Um,
Which I feel like, and we're kind of, falling a little bit away from the topic, which I am okay with. But I feel like in some ways Marvel tapped into that with the Ant-Man films, because those are essentially heist films. Um, but they're superhero heist films set in, in the Marvel universe, and they're actually engaging and fun. I was so surprised when I sat down and enjoyed that film as much as I did. But they're genuinely funny. They have pretty good stakes. And they have heart. Like, I was not expecting that when I came into those films. And I'm looking forward to a third one, right? Um, and I think that with DC Universe's TV shows, and this is a nice transition, I'm going to go ahead and pat myself on the back before I even finish transitioning. But I think they've also tapped into that a little bit. We'll see how far it goes. But when you look at Titans and how it feels like a mini spin-off of the DCEU, the DC
yes.
Entertainment Universe, or whatever it's called, it feels like it's a spin-off from there. Like, it's distinct from Arrowverse, but it is its own line to the films. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have Doom Patrol, which is adjacent to Titans, but has its own odd,
Oh, it is so
surrealist,
surreal.
like, very surrealist, also humorous, um,
Yes.
take on, um, and they predate the mutants, so I feel really bad of um, about what I'm about to say, which is a surrealist take on the mutant storyline, but it is what it is, in a way that is more accessible, at least to me, than when Marvel tried it with the FX show Legion. Did
Yes.
you watch that one?
I didn't know.
I watched like maybe the first two or three episodes. Aubrey Plaza in it was really, really good visually. that film, I mean that TV show was great. Like visually, like the colors, the I can't even explain to you how taken aback and like floored by that first episode I was. Like it was so good. But the actual plot running through it, I was like, "What? This is this is this is Square Enix levels of incomprehensible but not fun." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um and then to come back to DC Universe, uh Swamp Thing, which I'm still very sad that it was canceled. Because I was also pleasantly surprised with that. They did a completely different genre with Swamp Thing, and instead of making it just like a hero film, your first couple of episodes, it actually felt like a horror thriller or a horror suspense thriller show with a little bit of like environmental awareness thrown in. Um, and those first couple of episodes of Swamp Thing were really, really well done too. And then you turn around and you have Stargirl, which is a very bright, family friendly, youth oriented show, but also makes use of older and the oldest generation of heroes that you find in the DC universe that are not Batman and Superman. Um,
Yeah.
and like revamping those characters and bringing them to life for a younger generation, which I think is just awesome. And so like DC is doing that in finding those different genres and keeping them superhero stories, but shifting that genre a little bit so it becomes something that's a little bit more fresh, a little bit more new, and really engaging.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest, like DC's TV shows have how this is completely off topic, but I just was thinking to myself about how Matt Bomber gets to play a gay character in Doom Patrol, and like we still haven't gotten a gay character in a Marvel movie. Just gonna throw
Yeah.
that out there. Just
Mhm.
gonna throw that out there.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, it. I'm really enjoying the DC Universe TV shows, though we'll have to do a whole thing on Titans. Um,
Yeah.
but to just spin some positivity after we talked about two properties, uh, yeah, no, it's nice to see that they're trying to do something with what they're making. Try and give people the opportunity to try more than one genre. Doom Patrol is so surreal. I mean, you couldn't have gotten more surreal unless you'd let David Lynch create it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
True.
and it's it's already pretty out there. Um, but I think this is actually a perfect opportunity to just talk fully that like Stargirl feels like a CW show, but more. Like there's no, and maybe it's the lack of overhead of having to do something that is a cable show. It has a lot of the same kind of film feel, like they
Mhm.
shot it with TV cameras in mind, which I don't. It's interesting to think about it specifically in terms of Titans, which we know had a terrible, terrible budget and also did not use its budget appropriately in its first season. Like you need to have hair and makeup artists, especially ones that can do the hair and makeup of the lead characters in
Amen.
your TV show. Um,
Amen.
but Stargirl feels like they used the same level of budget for the film as a CW show or Titans did, but it doesn't suffer, I think, the same budgetary problems. I mean, for heaven's sakes, there's a lot of CGI in the first couple episodes, and I was not expecting that.
And I
Or
want to
for it to
go
be
on.
so good.
Yeah,
Go
it
ahead.
is the CG. I just wanted to chime in and say that I was not expecting that much of CGI. If you think about it in terms of Titans, the first, like, you had bits of CG in there, but like it took them a while for you to actually show Garth in an animal form. Gar,
Oh,
excuse me.
yes.
Gar in an animal form, and then with him transforming. And like when you watched it, you thought, well, I thought to myself, wow, they really threw a lot of money in there, and they didn't have a lot of money, which is not a knock to the people who created it. It's just like when you play a lot of video games and when you see a lot of films, you notice the quality of your CG in your media, and you can tell when something has a lot of money behind it and is really really well done, and when a studio only has so much money to spend on it. Does that make
Yes.
sense? And so when Stargirl started, like, first of all, it was immediately missing the blue filter of grit. There's
Hmm.
like no saturation, like there was no blue gray saturation over it. It was actually bright even in the beginning of the show, which, not to spoiler, is a battle scene or a fight scene. Um,
Hmm.
and then when you see the CG effects for the first time, they honestly looked movie quality, and I was like, this looks better than what we saw in Justice League and Superman versus Batman: Dawn of Justice. Like, this one character that they show looks 10 times better than, oh my gosh, what is the name of the guy who killed Superman?
Oh, I didn't see Man of Steel.
No, 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 no. I mean, he's the,
Darkseid?
no, 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 no. He is the guy who actually killed Superman in the comic books, and they created him in. Oh gosh, this is gonna kill me. I actually own those freaking comics, and I can't even remember what his name is.
Is it
Ugh.
Zod?
Doomsday.
There we are. I
Doomsday.
was way off. I've seen
No,
Batman vs Superman, and I do not remember the plot of it.
no. Let me tell you, I was thinking in my mind Deathstroke. I knew it began with a D, but the first thing that came to my head was Deathstroke, and that didn't make me happy. So of course I couldn't. I was ranting in my head, so I couldn't think of anything else. But yes, Doomsday. When when you go back and look at Justice League, I'm Justice League, and you see, what is Darkseid's son's name?
Oh, no, I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We've reached the area in which Huntsies doesn't know any information, frankly. Superman family, don't know it. Batman family, I can list you 12 different ways that Jason appeared before being retconned. But that's about as far as I got.
Yeah, DC's Cosmic Universe I don't know as well, but I think this is Calibac is the guy. I think that's the one that they used, or they drew on his character archetype to create the guy in Justice League. So if you look at him, or you look at Doomsday from Batman v Superman, like, and then compare it to this one CG, all CG character that they have in Stargirl, I think you'll agree to me that the Stargirl character looks 10 times better, and it probably had 100 times less the budget.
It did. Yeah, truly. It, it's, there's just something about it, like, it's really worth watching the first two episodes because there's something very about it that it manages to find a balance between specifically Shazam and Supergirl. Like,
Mm.
it's bright, but it has a better budget, but it has the same sort of TV writing. But
But it's a little bit
it's
better.
very, yeah, it's better. I was gonna say it's more compelling to me, and it's also just very clear. Like, the comedy is funny. We had a fun time, you and I, watching it, and talking about how Joel McHale is in it, and the role he plays is very much, if Ryan Reynolds hadn't already been signed with Marvel and didn't cost so much more than Joel McHale, Ryan Reynolds was probably the person they were thinking of when they wrote the script, and then and Joel McHale does a mighty good job, and I think he's quite funny, but he is bargain bin Ryan Reynolds.
So I want to take a second to say that Joel McHale and oh
Luke
my
Wilson.
god, no, no, I can't remember. This is terrible. I'm forgetting everyone's name right now. He played
Are we talking about
Chang.
Green Lantern?
No, no, he played
Oh, Chang.
Chang in Community.
Ken. Jiang?
Yes. So he and Joel McHale have a podcast that they recently started, like literally within the past maybe 2 or 3 months, called The Darkest Timeline. If anyone finds our podcast and listens to it and gets this far into it and hears Monsoon's call Joe McHale a bargain bin Ryan Reynolds,
He is,
please,
though. He's Blue Light Special.
Blue Light Special Ryan Reynolds, please tweet it with all the love that you can to Kim Jong, aka Senior Chang, so he can use that to burn Ryan Reynolds in his soul. I'm too chicken hearted to do it myself. But it should be done, because that would take the piss out of him, and it'd be so funny. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there.
Super important thing to do. You know, it keeps him humble. It keeps him bargain bin Ryan Reynolds.
Well, to return back to Stargirl really, really quick, I do want to mention that I read an article today where they interviewed Leah Thompson, who is better known for her NBC sitcom Caroline in the City, which I actually kind of remember watching. And she was also, was she Marty's mom in Back to the Future? I think she was. She was.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. And she is now a director, and she's directing at least 1 or 2 episodes of Stargirl. She has directed at least 1 or 2 episodes of Stargirl, which, for the record, I don't think we mentioned this in our intro. It's up to episode 6 and or 7 on DC Universe right now, and I believe they have 10 or 12 episodes. 10 or 12 episodes this season. But in her interview, which is on the Decider, the interviewers said that Jeff Johns told me that before they even started filming Stargirl, he actually screened Back to the Future for everyone to give to the whole cast and crew, so they knew the tone that they were going for. And Leah Thompson replied and says, well, they're complete. That she thinks that while the two things are completely different, I think that they got the same idea, the same hopeful and exuberant, youthful and fun for the whole family quality that Back to the Future had. In terms of the fun scope of it, I definitely think that Stargirl achieves that as well. So that was one of their baseline inspirational films to create. And you know what? Didn't I say to you while we were watching the first episode, because I found the setting very charming, I think I said to you, that looks like the clock tower to Back to the Future.
You did. You said that, and I admitted that I don't remember Back to the Future well enough to agree or disagree, but that makes perfect sense now with what you're saying, and also, like, that is a good, quick call. I just assumed it was an interesting nod, because one of the things about Stargirl is it's not our universe. It's like our universe, just like a little to the left, and not in that way where like TV shows don't know how to write teenagers and parents arguing with each other, but it genuinely feels like it's a little to the left, and we won't talk about that anymore because we don't want to spoil the rest of the show, but there are good reasons, I think, for why that feels that way that we'll find out as we get further in the show.
Sorry, I got a little distracted. I didn't realize that the CW's Archie universe had expanded so much. But apparently, they have Riverdale. They have Sabrina, although it's not affiliated. And now they have Katie Keene, which is a spinoff.
Really?
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to me because when I was little, before I got into like comics, my mom would buy me Betty and Veronica or Archie comics at the grocery store because I would beg for them. So that's actually if I think about it, that's actually my first foray into comics before, like, I've discovered Batman and such. Okay, yeah. Sorry, got distracted there.
No, I think, gosh, we could probably do a whole episode on Riverdale, even though I haven't even watched it. But I have so many thoughts on it. It's such a wild concept, but yeah, and it's interesting because I'm still not quite sure whether or not Stargirl is airing on the CW or just the DC universe. Because I'll be honest, I was trying to look up Leah Thompson when you were talking about her, and some of it reports it as CW Stargirl, which would explain why it feels the way it does. But it has a much bigger budget than a typical CW show.
Well, I
Like,
don't think it's
especially the starter season.
yes, and I don't think it's actually on the CW, but you know, CW is was it the marriage between UPN and the Warner Brothers channel? Um, so that's why, even though it's with the DC Universe, like it's under the DC Universe production wheelhouse, Warner
Hmm.
Brothers either outright owns a stake in the CW channel, which is why, since, forever, they've aired DC properties on there, starting with Superman, and then they tried Birds of Prey, and a couple of other things, too.
Interesting.
Now, if you are listening to, if you get to this part of the podcast and you discover that everything that I just said is a bold faced lie, because it's entirely possible, these are just from my memories from my youth. It's not necessarily anything that, you know, I know for a fact. But if you find out that I was wrong, please send an email to the Crash Gals Gmail account. That's crashgals@gmail.com, and say, ladies, you were wrong. Here's the right answer.
And if you've been sitting there screaming while we tried to figure out Doomsday, well, we figured it out eventually, and that's okay.
and, and I really do, not that I have to pull my geek card cred to anybody, but I really do own the entire run of the Superman's Dead comic book series because my mom bought them for me when I was little. So yes, and I even have like the comics with the crazy uh Metallo like Superman, and then Superboy, and then when they introduced Steel and like all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was there. Okay, guys, I was there.
So some
Well,
final thoughts, maybe. Harley Quinn, worth giving a shot. Uh, but if we're gonna rank them, Stargirl is our first recommendation. Harley Quinn's nice. Maybe watch it before you watch Birds of Prey, especially the first couple episodes, so you don't get your expectations too high. It is fun, and Harley Quinn does get to be like a main character, but it takes a very different turn into how she deals with becoming her own hero, and I think you will appreciate it more without Kathy Yen. I think Kathy Yen, who directed Birds of Prey's fantastic representation of what Harley Quinn would look like during a breakup. And then if you're curious, I mean, there's a lot of time now between 2021 and where we are, and if we're really that desperate for media at this point, which I just can't imagine we will be, we might have to come back and talk about the Snyder Cut, but I'm hoping we don't have to.
I am there with you. I agree with that. Start with Stargirls. Hit that up. It's new. It's fresh It's on the DC universe, and I believe that at one point in time it may actually make it to HBO Max. I know some of the other DC universe shows are also airing on that right now. You know what? One day we need to sit down and have a talk about the extended DC universe on other channels, because I've watched some of Pennyworth, and maybe I should stream that for us too, because I think you might enjoy some of. I don't. I don't know how you'd feel about all of it, but I think you'd enjoy the concept of it. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So then go to Harley Quinn. It's Venture Brothers light or Writers Training Wheels esque um,
Yes.
humor, but it is fun. You will laugh. And we have been told it gets better, so continue on the journey with us. And then finally, Snyderverse films. There are things in there that you may enjoy, um, but overall, the best thing that came out of the Snyder universe is that DC saw that it needed to do something drastically different, and it decided to do so. Um, and that's a harsh take, but it's a hot take and it's real. Like the better, more cohesive, coherent vision came out of DC after those Snyderverse films, and they saw them and they said, "This is not what we want to do." And while some of these things were already in play, what we got was the Wonder Woman film, which was distinct and starkly different. What we got was the Aquaman film, which was distinct and starkly different. What we got was Shazam, which was distinct and starkly different and a lot of fun. And we're getting a sequel to that with The Rock. Um,
Hmm.
and we're getting a Flash film in the near future. Hopefully, the last I heard that or last I read, they were doing some script rewrites.
Hmm.
But if it works out the way that the team wants it to, I also feel that it will, while it may have roots in the Snyderverse, it will be a completely different type of film. And I hope and applaud it if it is. So yeah, if you want to see where the universe was and how we eventually got to the Harley Quinn film, then you could watch it. But if not, just take a look at some of the other stuff that's on DC Universe. You don't have to hit those films. Just letting you know.
I will give Snyderverse one compliment. The "Is She With You" theme music
Ooh.
for Wonder Woman, we got a remixed 80s version for. The trailer for is two of my favorite cinematic score songs,
Mm-hmm.
especially for character introduction and theme song. And I will give the movies that credit because that was an ingenious move, and I adore that song.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. That is great. Well, Crash Gals has made it to the end of another podcast. Keep it up, and we might even get to 5 before the end of the year. Woot woot. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe. We're part of the Durnami Gaming network, so subscribe to Durnami Gaming. Um, you can also do all the things that you're supposed to do when you get there, like hit a bell, leave a comment, like it, and let us know what you think. We'll be back soon. Crash Gals out.
Bye.